It was the autumn of 2023 when it happened. I had been living in Grayford, a quiet city on the coast, but that weekend I drove north to visit my parents in the small town of Ravens Hollow. The road between them, Route 47, cuts through forests and cliffs overlooking the ocean. During the day, it's beautiful. At night, it feels wrong. I left my parents' house around 9 p.m. on Sunday. I had work early the next morning and didn't want to waste time driving at sunrise. That decision still bothers me. The first hour of the drive was uneventful. Just darkness, the hum of tires, and the occasional bend in the road. Eventually, the highway narrowed into a lonely 2-lane strip of asphalt surrounded by tall pines. Then the fog rolled in. It appeared almost instantly, swallowing the road until my headlights only showed about 20 feet ahead. I slowed down to around 30 miles an hour, gripping the wheel harder than I should have. That's when I saw the first person. He stood on the right shoulder of the road, half hidden in the fog. Tall, thin, completely still. He wasn't waving or trying to flag me down, just facing the road as if waiting for something. As I passed him, he didn't move, didn't even turn his head. I told myself maybe his car broke down somewhere behind him. It was strange, but not impossible. 10 minutes later, I saw him again. Same height, same dark coat, same posture. Only this time he was standing on the left side of the road. My stomach tightened. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. There were no intersections, no houses, nothing but forest. As I drove past, his head suddenly snapped toward me. Our eyes met. I felt cold instantly, like my body knew something my brain didn't. I sped up a little, desperate to put distance between us. The fog thickened. 3 minutes later, my headlights caught another figure ahead. This one stood directly in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes. The figure wore a hood, its face completely hidden. It didn't move, even with my headlights blasting into it. I flashed my brights again and again. Nothing. Panicking, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Someone was standing behind my car, closer than before, walking toward me slowly. My heart exploded in my chest. I swerved into the opposite lane and drove straight past the figure blocking the road. As I sped through the fog, something smashed violently into the back of my car. The impact jolted the entire vehicle forward. But when I looked behind me, there was nothing. No people. No headlights. No cars. Just fog. I drove the rest of the way home shaking. At dawn, I stepped outside to inspect the damage. My rear bumper was crushed inward. But that wasn't the worst part. Pressed into the metal were 5 long dents, spaced like fingers, and embedded deep in the center of the bumper was a piece of dark fabric from a coat. When I pulled it free, I noticed something stitched inside. A name. Mine. It happened during midterm break last April. I'm a senior in college now, and like most breaks, I went back to my hometown of Maple Ridge for the week. Maple Ridge is one of those quiet suburban towns that sits near a big city but feels completely cut off from it. There's no nightlife, no bars, nothing open past 9. Once you're back there, the place feels abandoned. Most of my old friends weren't around either. Their schools had different schedules, so I was stuck with an entire week of empty days. I had also been trying to cut back on drinking and nicotine, so I decided to keep myself busy by working out. Every afternoon I went for a run. Back in high school, when I ran cross country, I used to run the same 3-mile loop every day. It started at my house, cut through a narrow wooded trail, and came out on a street just a block away. I had probably run that route hundreds of times. On Tuesday around 5 in the evening, I decided to do it again. The moment I stepped outside, I noticed the fog. It was thick, unnaturally thick, the kind that seems to swallow the world instead of just hanging in the air. Everything farther than 30 feet away faded into gray. Still, the trail was simple. One path, no forks. So I started running. The woods were darker than I expected. The fog clung between the trees like smoke, and my footsteps sounded strangely loud against the dirt. But for the first mile, everything felt normal. Then I checked my watch. 2.5 miles. That didn't make sense. At that point in the loop, I should have been near the end of the trail. Instead, the forest stretched endlessly ahead of me. I kept running. 3 miles passed, then 3.5. I finally stopped, breathing hard. The path looked the same in every direction, just dirt, trees, and fog. That's when I heard the sound. At first I thought it was wind, but it wasn't. It was low and vibrating, like a deep human moan dragged through a broken speaker. The sound rose and fell slowly, almost like breathing, and it was behind me. I turned around and started running back the way I came. The sound followed. No matter how fast I ran, it stayed the same distance away, humming through the fog. My lungs burned, my legs shook, but the sound never got closer or farther. Just there. After what felt like forever, the trees finally opened up. I stumbled out of the trail and onto the street, gasping for air. Relief flooded through me until I turned around. Standing in the fog at the edge of the trail was a tall shape, at least 7 feet, maybe more. Its limbs were long and wrong, bending slightly as it swayed. It wasn't walking, just watching. I ran home without looking back. Later that night, after I showered, I checked my running app. The map of my route was corrupted, just a tangled mess of lines looping inside the woods. But one thing was clear. At the deepest point of the forest, the GPS marker had stopped moving for almost 10 minutes. And during that time, the pace reading said I was still running. This happened about 7 years ago, near the end of October. My friend Marcus and I had been planning a kayaking trip across Blackwater Inlet, a huge tidal bay along the northern coast. It was a quiet place. Miles of gray water, oyster beds, and long, empty stretches of marsh. On clear days, it felt peaceful. The day we went out wasn't clear. We launched early in the morning from a small dock outside the town of Harbor's End. A thick coastal fog hung over the entire bay, the kind that turns the horizon into a blank wall. Marcus and I had both been kayaking for years, so fog didn't scare us. We had a compass, GPS, and knew the tides. For the first hour, everything was calm. The fog muffled the world so completely that the only sounds were our paddles dipping into the water. Then we heard rowing. Not paddling, rowing. The heavy creak and splash of oars pulling through water. Marcus stopped paddling. I did too. The sound continued somewhere to our right, maybe 100 feet away, steady and slow. But when we looked into the fog, we couldn't see anything. "Probably a fisherman," Marcus said. He called out, "Hey, kayakers over here." No answer. The rowing continued at the exact same rhythm. Slow, patient. We paddled again, thinking we'd eventually pass whoever it was. but the sound never changed. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No matter which direction we angled, the rowing stayed the same distance away, always somewhere off to our right. Not closer, not farther, just there. At one point, the fog thinned for a second. Through the haze, I saw a small wooden rowboat drifting in the water. Someone sat inside it, hunched over the oars. I couldn't see their face. Then the fog swallowed it again. That's when Marcus said we should head for shore. We changed course immediately, paddling southeast toward land. The rowing followed us the entire time. Stroke, creak, splash. Stroke, creak, splash. Then suddenly the fog began to lift. Within a minute, we could see nearly 100 yards in every direction. The bay was empty. No rowboat, no fishermen, nothing but open water. Neither of us spoke. We just paddled faster until we reached the shoreline. When my kayak scraped the sand, I jumped out into the freezing water and dragged it up the beach. I felt relieved just standing on solid ground again. Marcus had walked a little further up the sand. Then he said my name quietly. I walked over. There were footprints leading out of the water. Barefoot prints, wet and fresh, heading up the beach toward the trees. But something about them was wrong. They were too deep, like whoever made them was unbelievably heavy. And the spacing between them. Each step was nearly 8 feet apart. Marcus whispered, "That's not possible." I followed the prints with my eyes. They came from farther down the beach. About 50 yards away sat the same dark wooden rowboat I had seen through the fog. Empty. The oars still rocked gently inside it. The footprints led away from the boat, past where we had landed, and into the forest. But what terrified me most wasn't the size of the prints. It was the direction. Because when I looked closer, I realized something. Those weren't footprints leaving the water. They were footprints walking back into it. And out in the bay, somewhere beyond the thinning fog, we heard the oars start rowing again.